Welcome back. This is my black Amiga, which you may have seen in the last episode, which has the fancy new black keys and the fancy new black case. In this episode, I want to fit a Gotek in here, but with a twist. I also want to keep the 3.5-inch disk drive, because for me, the Amiga 500 is only a real Amiga with a 3.5-inch disk drive. So you might know these Gotek solutions, and that is pretty much a disk drive emulator, and you can put it in your Amiga, and some go and butcher the case, which I'm definitely not going to do. I'm not even using this case because I want to use only the PCB inside the Amiga without all this fancy cabling which you normally put in the back of the Amiga in the external drive connector, and have it completely invisible. You might have seen these things which you can put on here, which house a display and a rotary encoder. I'm not even going to use this. So if my Gotek is in here, you won't be able to see it. And now you might ask, okay, so how do you know which disk is selected? How do you select a disk image? How do you change the USB stick? Well, there's a solution for that, and we will get to this in episode 2. In today's episode, we will go put the Gotek inside and use a simple switch, which is already on the back. Right now, this is my boot selector switch. We will use that switch to switch between the internal drive and the Gotek drive. So both will be DF0. We won't be using any boot selector. We will just use some cables and a switch. And you can either use the Gotek or the disk drive, and you don't need these external connector thingies here. And yeah, let's see how that goes. So you know these Gotek drives, which you can put into an external enclosure. You can get these external adapters, which then just connect to the Amiga, and you need a boot selector inside your Amiga, I guess on the CIA, to actually select the Gotek to boot from. What I want to do is I want to put another Gotek here, just this PCB inside my Amiga, but there's a problem. If I have this PCB inside my Amiga, I don't have access to this little display, and I don't have access to the buttons, and I don't have access to the USB port. So I want a solution where the Gotek is completely invisible, and the Amiga has no extensions except for maybe one button to switch it on and off. The Gotek, that is. So in this episode, I'm going to build a mechanism to switch between the standard floppy drive and the Gotek, so that only one has power. I hope that works. I've prepared one of these lengthy cables which plug into the Amiga on one side, and then they normally have a twist. Here's one for drive and here's one for drive, and I removed the twist right here. So I opened this up, retwisted this. I don't care about this here. This is for 5.25-inch drive, which we are not using. So we have a straight data line, and both drives, both the Gotek and the normal floppy drive, will be connected to this straight data line, and only one of them will have power. So to give an idea, we have the floppy here, and we have the Gotek here, and both are connected with this data cable to the Amiga, and both are connected on the power side. So this is data or data, don't know how you pronounce that, and we also have a power connection which is usually this 4-wire connection, which has a 5 volts here and a 12 volts here and 2 ground wires in the middle. And what we will do is we will build a mechanism to switch the 5 and 12 volts on off, or toggle these between the Gotek and the disk drive. And so only one of these is really active, and either can be DF0. So this is DF0 and this is DF0. But only one of these two will have power. So we have pretty much this 4-wire power connector, and that goes like this, and like this, and this right here is the switch, which can either be switched to Gotek or switched, so then it will go, power will go this way, or switched to 3.5 inch drive and the power will go this way. And that should pretty much make the Gotek be usable without any adapters or external stuff, or putting it in an enclosure or something like this. So that we have a Gotek that is completely invisible, and you can use it only with your standard Amiga stuff, like your monitor and your standard Amiga keyboard. So that is pretty much the plan. I haven't tested if that really works. So join me and see if it actually does. Let's try to figure out how to do this voltage switching. And for that we need one of these switches. This is a standard switch which has this black thingy on it, which I recently discovered, and they work great on my black Amiga case. So you have these 6 prongs here, and what happens is if you put the switch to this side, these will be connected. And if you put the switch to this side, these will be connected. You can check that with a multimeter. And you have 2 connections which are individual from each other. So you can switch these 2 and these 2, or these 3 and these 3. These are 2 separate lines, which is perfect because on one line we can switch the 5 volts left and right, and on the other we can switch the 12 volts left and right. The ground wire we don't care about because you can have ground, doesn't matter because it doesn't give power to one of these, and so only one is always the drive, the disk drive, or the Gotek is actually powered, and so only one should be sending and receiving data over this cable. So we don't care, we don't have to switch this cable because this is just data, I hope. But I could be completely wrong and it wouldn't work. So I have a spare Amiga board which I will use for this testing. I will not put this into my final black Amiga for now. So this is our cable, and this side will connect to the Amiga. There are these 4 pins which there's a connector which looks just like that on the Amiga, and you put this in, and that is the power connection, and this will go to our switch here, or let's say these 2 lines, the yellow and the brownish, purple line will go to the switch, and these 2 are the ground lines. So these will just be extended so that we get the same cable length, and that is the first thing we do. We extend these cables, and for that we just cut off these things here. You can do this without soldering if you have DuPont cables which you can just put together, but I have too few of these double-sided female connectors, so I will have to solder. Just not a big deal, but you will have to solder on the switch. I guess you can't get around that, sorry. So what we do now is we extend the ground cable, or the ground cables rather, and that is not too complicated. Solder them together and heat shrink them so that they don't short anything inside the Amiga. There's some heat shrink here. Put this here and here. Twist these cables So we have a blue extension which ends in one of these, which goes, wait, that doesn't work. We do actually need two of these because we have two drives. Okay, can use that. So we have to put a second one of these. So we have two ground leads, one going to the Gotek and one going to the disk drive. Just put that on here. So now we have one ground cable going in and two ground cables going out here. And we need to do the same on the green line. We have one green here and we will add a second green in a minute. And then we have already the middle pins figured out. And then we have to put these to the switch. Let me check. I have another green one. Very good. Okay, like that. And then we put some solder grease on it. And then we solder it. Just get some solder. And then we just put that heat shrink over there. And that heat shrink over here. Grab this and burn it to the ground. Okay, so that is our dual ground wire. And one of these connects, one blue and one green, connects to the Gotek right here. And the other one connects to the Amiga disk drive. And yeah, that is always present, so that is not switched. And now we come to the interesting part, which is the switching of 12 and 5 volts. And we will take the yellow wire as 12 volts and the purple wire as 5 volts. And we cut off the ends again. And this is the end. My only friend, the end. And in this case, we connect. I'm just cutting off very small parts because these go to the middle pins of this switch. You will see in a second. So now we have to connect these wires here. Let me try this way. And I put on some more solder and just put the cable here and push the solder in here. That should do the trick. It's much easier if you have a helping hand and that lays flat, but for the purpose of showing in this video, try to do it this way. Okay, that's on there. So now we have our middle lines connected. And next up we have to connect, I will use this as yellow because I don't have any more yellow cables. One yellow up here and one yellow up here, and that goes to the 12 volts on the Gotek, and that one, the other one, goes to the 12 volts on the disk drive. And then we can switch between the 12 volts, and we do the same for the 5 volts on the bottom. So now we have to put the white cable in the top row where the yellow cable was. Let's do this. Perfect. And the same on the other side. These DuPont cables are really shitty to solder. But that worked. Okay, so now we have the top three row. We have the yellow in the middle and the whites on the side, which are our 12 volt lines. And now we do the same for the 5 volts. Just push down on the cable. That does the trick. Okay. So in theory, that should be it. That should be our switch. So let's put some cable tie around this so that it has a little strain relief. Okay. And now we connect our 5 volts, which is the brown cable in my case, to this spot here, and the white cable to this spot here. Before we go and put this into an Amiga, let's just check if the wiring is correctly, and for that we will check the 12 volts, which should only be present in one switch setting. So 12 volts is here. There's nothing now. Let's switch over. And now there is. Very good. Same for the 5 volts, which should only be present in this setting, which is right now, right here. If we switch, it's not. It should be on this side. Let's check. It's not very complicated, and if you're an electrical engineer, this might all seem very funny to you. But it serves a purpose. That's called education. That's because I do this. And you see, works. Okay, nice. So I guess we are ready to put this into my test Amiga and see if it blows up. So as you can see, this is not a stock disk drive. What we have to do is, I'd say we first test if this power switching circuit works inside this Amiga. So what we do is we connect these lines, and from there we go and see if that drive is active and that drive, the Gotek, is active before we connect the data cable. So we have to remove this data cable here because we don't need that. And that was one I did straighten out. That is, by the way, the alternative to cutting or opening this, because this was broken then. I had to glue this together. So instead of opening this, you can also cut the twist and resolder them together like I did here. That works. It's only 6 cables, 7. So it's doable. And that is a standard PC floppy cable, so nothing special here. But it's important that you have that straight connection. There can't be a twist. So let's remove this. That can go, and that can go too. Just to make sure, because that was the way I killed one of my Amigas, or one of the disk drives. Let's just make sure which is which. I assume that the yellow one is 5 volts and the red one is the yellow one is 12 volts and the red one is 5 volts. But let's measure this, because I don't want to kill another disk drive. We have 12 volts on the yellow one. Yeah. So yellow is on the left side. So let's connect our construction here. Yellow to the left, green and blue you can put wherever you want in the middle, or which order you want rather. And the purple line, or the brown line, goes to the right. So that now should actually activate the Gotek. You see this? Now it does. Okay, that is good. So now let's connect the disk drive. And I will have to check again, because that goes in like this. So yellow goes to the very left pin, and from my perspective here, and 5 volts go to the right pin. Make sure that your connector is the same orientation before you plug this in. And this is only for the Rev 6 board. I guess there are other Rev boards out there in the A500 Plus where the polarity is turned around. So take care of that, please. So we have the white cable which goes, let's check again, double check, to the left side of the drive. And we have the brown cable which goes to the very right side. And we have the green and blue, which go in the middle. Okay. So that should now switch on the drive. So right now the Gotek is alive. And if I switch over, now the floppy should be alive. And it is. Nice. And the Gotek is off. Okay. Now let's do the final bit, which is testing with the data cable attached. There's a 1 here, and that means that the red, that's a bit hard to see maybe, just a dotted red line here. This has to go here, and you take the longer part of the cable and the connector on that end and put it in here. And then one connection goes to the drive and one connection goes to the Gotek. And it doesn't matter which is which because they are both the same. Actually, let's check. So my drive has a red stripe here. So in my case, that cable goes with the right stripe to the left side from my perspective. That's in. And then we have that part of the cable which goes into the Gotek. And the Gotek has its pin 1 here, because it says 34 here, so we have to twist this around and put this in like this. Everything is connected. Not sure if this works. We will see. Fingers crossed. I think right now we are on the drive side of things, so let's see if it ticks. And it ticks. So here's my USB stick, and let me just put this in here. And then we should, if I turn the switch, see this boot. And it's loading Dungeon Master. Yeah, it actually seems to work. Nice. Yeah, upon a deeper test, I found out that if the Gotek is plugged in and the disk drive is plugged in, the Gotek works fine if the disk drive is plugged in, but the disk drive does not work. As you can see, put in the disk. Doesn't see the disk change. Yeah. It works the other way around. As you could see, the Gotek was clearly booting and the video showed that. So there must be something we have to do, or to cut some kind of trace from the Gotek to the cable, which is still active. So let's try to find out what that could be. Yeah, well, I already feared it wouldn't be that easy. So that is the drive connector in the Amiga, and all the bottom lines here are ground, so we don't have to consider these. So one or more of these up here, these lines, seem to be still active, and for that, disable that this internal floppy drive sees the disk. I think I have to do some read up on the drive. And maybe it is just this drive, but I don't think it is. Instead of doing some light reading, I did some light cabling, as you can see. And my idea was to find out which cable are really used by the Gotek. And as you can see here, it's only 10 of the 34 pins that are really needed. And the whole goal of this operation was to find out which pin was blocking that drive from reading when I switched over the power. And lo and behold, it is the density select pin, which would be pin 2 right here. So what I did is the following. Normally you would have this drive connected with a cable, which I did. This is connected to the Amiga, and this part of the cable would be connected to the Gotek drive. That way I couldn't just put out pins. So what I did was I use these DuPont cables. I just put these in here. So this makes a connection to here. So this is pretty much like putting it in here. But I can now selectively connect and deconnect cables as I like. And that is pretty much what I did. So I went through the trouble of really checking every pin here. And these 10 pins that are connected here are the pins that are really used by the Gotek. So all of these pins right here on this side of the connector, this is a 34 pin floppy connector where you put your floppy data cable. All these pins are ground. And that leaves us with 17 more pins on the other side. And it turns out that if this pin, the density select pin 2, is connected to the Gotek while the floppy tries to load a disk, it just won't load the disk. So you have to actually break that connection, and that is what I did. I put that on the switch. I will show you in a minute. And there are some pins that you don't even need to connect. And you don't need this pin, you don't need the index pin. You need the motor enable A, but you don't need the drive select B, drive select A, motor enable B. But you do need all the others except for the disk change. So if you connect these 10 pins, then you're good to go. The Gotek will work as intended. So what I basically did is I did make the connection between the 12 volts, the 5 volts on the power connector, and pin 2 of the data connector switchable. And if you look at a switch like that, that is pretty much the switch. And if you take a look on the bottom of that, there's 9 pins. If you have the switch in the position that can switch left and right, here and here, you have this side and you have this side. And what you do is, if you switch to this side, all these pins are selected and connected to these. If you switch to this side, all these pins are connected. So this to this, and this to this, and this to this. A pretty simple switch. So in order to do the voltage switching, we have the 5 volts, we have the 12 volts, and we have the density select on the data, which is this pin right here, pin 2. Let's just call this pin 2. And these come from the power connector, this comes from the data connector, and we put this wire here, this wire here, and this wire here, and then we have these on the connector, on the switch. We have 5 volts on the switch, 12 volts and density, but this is not connected to anything, so we have to put a connection on the other side, and we have the Gotek here, and we have the floppy here, and we have the power connector with its 4 pins, The middle pins are ground. Let's say this is 5 volts and this is 12 volts. And let's say this is 5 volts and this is 12 volts. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't have to take care of the ground pins because ground is ground, but we have to take care of these 5 volts and 12 volts. So we decide that we want to have this side for the Gotek and this side for the floppy. So we go and connect this 5 volt line to here and this 12 volt line to here. Let me do this in color. Now this is the green line. And we have the 12 volts from here going here. This is 5 volts from here to here, like that. And that way, was the first version I built. You can switch the power and switch it on and off between the floppy and the Gotek. But as we learned, that is not enough. We also have to switch that pin 2. And what you can do, and that is what I did with my Rat's Nest implementation of that, is you have your data cable that has one connector here, one connector here, one connector here. This one goes into the Amiga. Let's say the second one goes and connects to the floppy, and you just plug it in as you would. And the last one, you only connect the DuPont cables from this connector to the Gotek. So you need a DuPont connector which looks like this. You have a pin on one side which connects into the female connector of that floppy cable, and you have a female connector which connects to the Gotek data connector, which has pins. And you connect them straight from let's take a look again. You leave out pin 2 for now. You connect straight the motor enable pin and all these pins, and the pin 2 from that connector you do connect. I should use another color. Let's take black. You connect pin 2 down to this one here. And all the other pins you connect straight to your Gotek data. But pin 2 you connect to here, and from here, we said this is a Gotek position, from here to pin 2. So this is the only pin or the only data connection that is switched. The rest of the connections are straight, but this one goes through the switch. And that way you have a switchable Amiga which can use the floppy in one switch position and the Gotek in the other switch position. It works flawlessly. So this is the way this will pretty much end up in the Amiga. So what I have to do now is, and I don't have that in stock right now, this is a 6-pin switch which can switch 2 separate lines. What we need is, we need one that can do 3 separate lines, because now we have to switch this pin 2 also. So we will solder this pin 2 here so that we can switch on and off the Gotek pin 2 so that this can actually boot. So this works now. In this condition right here, it works. It's just not pretty. So, but it works. You can do what I aimed to do, which is use a Gotek and a floppy drive and just one switch and make it work without any external adapters and closures and stuff like that. So I'm pretty happy. Took me, well, I thought it would take me 20 minutes just to do the power cable switch. Now I'm in about 6 hours, but well, worth the time. We did learn something here. So if you have to connect a Gotek drive, you just need 10 DuPont cables. You don't have to go and buy a fancy floppy cable, because that is all it is, 10 pins. And so that is part 1. And in the next episode we will go put this into the case, the Amiga case, and enable it to be working with the usual Amiga keyboard without the push buttons on the Gotek OLED. Instead of using the OLED display, we use the standard Amiga output on a monitor. That's it for this episode. So thanks for watching, and until next time, bye.
Thank you for watching Retro is the New Black. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. If you like the video, please share. Every like, share, and comment helps a lot. Until next time, bye-bye.